I think had you told me when we started like borrowing my dad's car in 2011 that we'd partner with Dwayne Wade and Chance the Rapper. Well, I didn't even know who Chance the Rapper was in 2011 probably, but like, but had you told me that like and then we'd get national distribution and be on every TV of that had Fox in the country, it would have been wild to think about, but.
Dusty, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having
me. The screening was a hit in my opinion.
Agreed.
That was probably my fourth time seeing Cambodian Futures.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Maybe seen it more than my mom. I think you're right up there.
Probably once after you sent it to me. I mean, I'm sure if it was a hard decision to make it like 16 minutes, but what an impactful 16 minutes, and huge kudos to like the intro. I'm sure the sound design where like Ethan took a breath and was like, I love that part. So anyone listening who, if you haven't seen Cambodian Futures by Dustin Nakao-Haider, please get on that. Is there a place to see it? Kind of,
yeah,
because it's on PBS, right?
It's a film that's produced as part of a series called In the Making.
Yeah.
We were the finale of the season, which was cool, the second season. It's produced by Firelight Media and PBS's American Masters. So each film focuses, all the filmmakers are BIPOC filmmakers focusing on emerging BIPOC artists. So American Masters has been, it's like one of the OG doc series, even from the 80s, like okay. Martin Scorsese's Bob Dylan documentary is an American Master.
Oh, wow.
Just that one is one that I watched when I was in high school. It was hugely
so the series
has
been around.
Has been around. So, but this is only the second year that they've done these digital shorts about emerging artists. So, my film was about Ethan Lim at Hermosa, and like in theory, Ethan Lim could maybe have a feature-length documentary one day, but we're starting with these shorts. So, there's other films about. A black opera singer at the Met, a muralist in Detroit, an indigenous illustrator. There's a really cool range of artists and people that are featured, and they're all on YouTube, and then you can find them all on the PBS app, and they're all streaming, and they're all awesome, worth checking out.
So, at this current time, where's your headspace at? You're doing like the circuit of screenings, or like, and you're probably juggling a few other projects. Like, what's your headspace like these days?
Yeah, I mean, it's May, it's been my busiest AAPI month, which I keep joking about. All due respect to AAPI month. Yeah. But yeah, it's been busy in a good way. The film was really done, like finished in the end of last year, so like the fall, winter of 2022. Okay. And then all the screenings really started in February. We kicked it off with our premiere. We premiered the whole series at Big Sky Film Festival in Montana, which is an awesome festival. And then I was kind of like psychologically and emotionally done with the project. It was a big endeavor, and I'm sure we'll get into the details of actually making it. But we finished the film last year, and then about 6 weeks ago, I got an email from PBS offering me a spot to screen it nationally as part of another episode, a feature-length episode of American Masters about the Korean video artist Namjoon Paik, which is an incredible, awesome film that premiered at Sundance. And so they wanted to program my short with that, but they, these program windows on TV are very specific. So they said we have 8 minutes and 47 seconds. So I had to take my 16-minute film, 16 and a half minute film, and cut it down to something that was just about 9 minutes, which was it was like when you feel like
how do you choose?
Exactly.
Oh my God.
So like anyone that I'm sure has gone through any sort of creative practice, when you feel like you're done with something, you feel like, psychologically, emotionally complete with something. And then they're like, hey, go back in there and cut it in half. And it was already a short. Like you said, the choices to kind of get it to 16 were tough already, just because my background has been more in longer form stuff, for better or for worse. Yeah. And so, having to go back into it was like a lot. And so it was kind of like a sprint. I had about, I edited the 16-minute version for maybe, I don't know, somewhere, I have to count it out, but maybe 6 to 8 months, maybe 9 months. Oh, wow. And then I only had 4 or 5 weeks to cut it in half, which was its own challenge.
And on this film, you directed, produced, and edited?
Yeah, edited, and I shot it.
Shot it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I tried to wear all the hats, kind of by design. Basically, or at least that decision-making process was informed by me coming back here. So I grew up in Evanston. I went to ETHS, was ready to get the hell out of Dodge when I was graduated, and I went to school in New York, went to film school at NYU, and then lived in New York for about 11 years, and then I lived in Miami for another 2 to 3 years, and then during the pandemic, I moved back to Chicago. I mean, there are lots of reasons why, but I think everyone was kind of in that state in the summer of 2020 where it felt like the whole world was on fire and you're trying to make sense of what you cared about and what mattered. And at the time, I thought I would move back to New York, but my family's all here. My fiance had just graduated from grad school, and so we moved back to Chicago. So anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying that the project with Ethan and Cambodian Futures was my first project that I did back here in Chicago. And creatively, I wanted to like go back to where I started. Like, I feel very lucky that I've collaborated with a lot of
meaning doing everything
myself.
By yourself.
Exactly. So, you know, I feel blessed that I've collaborated with like big groups of people, with awesome crews and amazingly talented people. But I kind of like made a choice when I got the commission to do Cambodian Futures that I was like, I'm going to do it all, for better or for worse. I'm going to direct it, I'm going to produce it, I'm going to shoot it, and I'm going to edit it. Because that's what I used to do when I was first starting out. So it's kind of like a return to Saturn creatively.
How do you come to a point where you feel like it's complete?
Well, there's like a famous quote that sometimes is attributed to Coppola, but also I've heard it attributed to other people too. But it's like, a film is never finished, it's just abandoned. And like, I think that's true of any sort of creative endeavor. You know, you could say it about a painting, you could say it about a piece of music, you could say it about a piece of literature. But yeah, a project is never finished, it's just abandoned. So, and it's hard to know. Sometimes there's deadlines, sometimes there's external factors that kind of push you to a certain point. Yeah. So in this sense, I had a deadline.
And if you didn't, are you the type to procrastinate, or are you really very self-motivated to? I feel like these episodes come out faster if I'm like pressure, if there's like a deadline.
An external deadline definitely helps. Yeah. I appreciate an external deadline. I definitely do push myself, but if it's just me, you know, the paralysis of overanalysis is something that I think we all suffer from, but I'm definitely a victim.
Can you share like your initial introductions to Ethan?
Yeah. Ethan, I always try and remember exactly how, but I think it was my cousin who's like really into food and is very kind of plugged into like what's happening around the city. Yeah. She had asked me if I had heard about this guy doing crazy sandwiches.
Still haven't? Well, I had the chicken at dinner, but like I didn't have the actual sandwich.
Well, so I think because in the last year or so, he's really shifted towards more of the meals, the fine dining meals. But so initially, I should say, he started out as a hot dog and hamburger place for like high school kids. Like, it was a classic Chicago hot dog hamburger stand. And that's when he opened it. There's more context and background that matters for him, but at least that's where he kind of, when he opened up Hermosa, that's what it was. You go get a cheeseburger, you get a Coke, and you sit there with your friends and you know, shoot the shit after school.
That's
like,
cool.
You know, everyone knows that place. Everyone went to that place, especially if you're from Chicago, the hot dog stand near your high school or whatever. And then he started to integrate more of his interest and passions in Asian flavors and like sort of like pan-Asian flavors into sandwiches. And he kind of had at that time, his thesis statement for his work at the restaurant was, can you sandwich it? So if like he had an idea for like a mu ping sandwich. So mu ping is the kind of famous Thai skewers, pork skewers, or like a gochujang pork belly sandwich, you know. So he started to
experiment
experiment in all these different ways to put things on a bun, and the Cambodian fried chicken sandwich became like the kind of signature dish. So that's like it's marinated in kurung, which I don't know if I'm saying correct.
I have a hard time saying that too.
Yeah, some of the Cambodian Words are tough. But yeah, so it's a kind of traditional Cambodian herb paste that he marinates the chicken in it, and then he deep fries it and puts it on a sandwich. And that thing kind of set the city on fire, so to speak, and started to get written up in all these different places. And that's, I think, when my cousin caught wind of it and was like, have you heard of it? And then during the pandemic, he, like everybody, got stuck inside and kind of had this moment where he was like trying to figure out what he wanted to do with the space, and he knew that people weren't able to eat inside, so he kind of came up with this idea for the family meal, which is basically a private dining experience where he converts the sandwich space during the day into like a fine dining experience at night for 4 to 8 people. And I did the meal. So, but even before I did the meal, I had reserved a meal because it was like the first place that my family and I went to go have dinner.
That was the first place you went to
during the pandemic. Yeah, where first time we ate inside. At that point, we had maybe done some outdoor dining or whatever. But the first time we went back inside, summer 2020. August 2020, we went to...
That's quite an experience for your first time back.
Exactly. But so even before we went to the meal, I had my reservation email thread with him, and then I got invited to pitch on the series, and I kind of had a list of people that I thought might be good fits, emerging artists that had some level of social justice kind of approach to some of the work. That was the very broad theme.
So that was the inception. Is like you had this project, and you were just brainstorming who could fit this project.
Exactly, and I'd been really interested in doing something in culinary arts for a while.
Okay.
So yeah, I had been interested in doing something, so I just replied to that email thread, and it was like, hey man, like I'm coming in for the meal in like a month, but I just got this opportunity. Kind of crazy. Would you want to be the subject of the documentary? And he was like, oh, that's so flattering. And so I asked if I could just come in and we could just chat, and we just sat and we shot the shit for like 2 or 3 hours. He made me a sandwich. And we just talked about our lives and talked about the potential of the project and what it could be. And he was in. And I've had experiences in the past where maybe I don't have that meeting first, and I pitch something that might not be realistic to someone. So in this case, I wanted to talk to him about it, talked about my ideas, talk about his background and what made sense to him, and
feels organic.
Exactly. And we kind of went from there, but then I had to go do the application. So I filled out this huge application. A few months went by. I don't know what Ethan thought. If Ethan was like, all right, that guy came and went, he asked. But yeah, then about 2 months later, I got the call that we were awarded funding to go make the film. And then I called him and he was like, oh my God, like this is happening. And I was like, yeah, it's happening. And then we started the project in the fall of 21.
Wow.
Yeah.
What, during that 2 to 3 hour conversation, what did he say? Did he say anything that made you feel like this is it? Like I want to go deep with this.
Well, on a surface level, what was cool was that like our backgrounds felt very similar.
Okay.
Like, I grew up in Evanston. He grew up in like Albany Park, Jefferson Park area, like northwest side of the city, and we were like talking about our favorite dim sum places. We were talking about, and it was Furama on Argyle. We were talking about our favorite Thai place, which was
Siam noodle.
Yeah, I wrote that in the post. So it was like, oh, there's a synergy here. Like he's a bit older than me. He's a few years older than me, but
a kindred spirit.
Exactly. It was like, oh, here's another Asian kid from Chicago area that like we've been going to the same spot. So there was like this like bond right there. It was like, oh, we're on the same wavelength in terms of our background and our history. And then on a deeper level, it became kind of what he was telling me about his own family history and coming here. And
can you pitch for the listeners like what his goal with Family Meal was?
Yeah, so the family meal for him was a way to take the food that he grew up eating with his mom and kind of elevate it into a more of like a fine dining approach. So that may seem like, okay, yeah, I've heard a lot of chefs say stuff like that. That's like what a lot of chefs do. But I think what makes his food special, aside from the fact that his technique and his ability is like very high and he's very talented in terms of just the actual cooking, which matters, but on a intellectual or artistic level, what I think sets him apart in a really fascinating way is that he's beyond just trying to elevate the food that he grew up with, he's also taking a look at Cambodian history and trying to reimagine it. So
Like what it could have been
Exactly.
had the war not happened.
So yeah, that's the simple way of explaining it. Is like, Cambodia went through this awful genocide, this horrible civil war, from the fallout of the Vietnam War that destabilized the whole region, and the Khmer Rouge took over the Cambodian government and basically, enslaved and killed a huge swath of their population. And with that, all the stuff their cultural stuff got destroyed. So, if you want to go look up some fun stuff, Cambodian psychedelic rock from that time.
What?
Incredible. Super sick. Cambodian filmmakers, Cambodian actors,
wow.
all of this stuff that just all got destroyed by the Khmer Rouge, including culinary traditions, including recipes. And so Ethan's food tries to reimagine what Cambodian food could have looked like had the war never happened. And that is something that we kind of dubbed. He thinks I came up with it. I think he came up with it. I know, it's his idea, but I guess maybe he thinks I kind of coined the phrase, but we've been calling it culinary futurism. That's the idea, and that's where kind of the title of the film comes in, Cambodian Futures. That's like, there's this deep, dark, traumatic, destructive past, but then within our mind, we can create a future that might not exist, but then,
That's so cool.
Then we put it on the table and you eat it, so... Or he does. I eat it.
What I've learned through this podcast and through meeting of individuals from a variety of different industries is like whatever we end up doing, it's just a vessel to create a community and connect and potentially make change.
Yeah, I think it's cool because I know you talk to a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different disciplines, but especially for me, since I've come back to Chicago, trying to reintegrate into an active community or be an active member of my community, I think is super important. Especially a lot of people talk about community-based filmmaking and how you can be an ethical and responsible artist within the community that you live in. I don't know, when I lived in New York and when I lived in Miami, it's not to say that I lived in neighborhoods where people were impersonal, but it's felt different. I live in Rogers Park now, and I know all the people in my building, and so it's not even just like knowing other artists or knowing other filmmakers, but like knowing the person that lives next door, knowing the people that are
just being neighborly,
Exactly. And how that can inform your practice, how that can just inform your daily life in terms of who you are and how you want to interact with the world. I think that the world can be really overwhelming and the world can be really scary, and we could sit here for an hour and talk about all the reasons to be pessimistic.
It's easy to be pessimistic.
Yeah, exactly. But I think when I want to be optimistic or I want to feel hope about the future, I think about the ways that you can kind of have actual impact, and it's within your community. It's within the immediate people that you know and the way that you want to see the world right in front of you. What's right there.
I think when people try to think about ways that they can make change, it's overwhelming when it's on a large scale. But if you remember, like, just your neighbor, you can help anyone out, it makes it more realistic.
Absolutely.
Going back to a little bit of Shot in the Dark.
Sure.
When was that filmed? And I feel like it was over 10 years ago, or like
2012.
Yeah.
Starting the filmmaking. Yeah. Well, the film was released in 2018.
Okay.
So, but the production of it is a journey. So yeah, it started as a short film that I made for this defunct website, digital magazine called Life and Times, Jay-Z's Life and Times. So it's like Jay-Z's digital magazine that he and the good people at Rock Nation started in 2011. And so the summer of 2011, the summer I graduated from college, I knew I wanted to do something about high school basketball in Chicago.
They were looking for that?
I was working with a company called Scheme Engine that's still doing amazing stuff to this day. And I still freelance with them from time to time. But then I was kind of, I should say, Scheme Engine got a contract with Rock Nation to do all of the video content for Life and Times.
Okay.
So when we were coming out of college, that was like our main thing. And it was an incredible place to be in as like young filmmakers just out of school, that we had a long creative leash and we could pitch a lot of what we were interested in. So if there was a musician that I was really into, or if there was a restaurant I wanted to profile or something like that.
Go deeper. I think I know what you mean, but go deeper with a long creative leash.
Well, that it was like a magazine setting, so there was like sort of an editorial process in the way that maybe a journalist would pitch an article that they want to do, and we were the young folks in the room that had some finger on some pulse of what was interesting and what could make for interesting short documentary content.
But there were definitely restrictions, right?
Yeah, I mean,
is that what you mean by leash?
Yeah, I guess leash makes
the fact that it's long allows you to roam and be.
I guess leash makes it sound like there were some restrictions. I felt like a lot of awesome creative freedom there to go after ideas that I was interested in, and so that summer, which was really the first year we were working there, I was like, I want to do something about high school basketball in Chicago, and I didn't know exactly what it was going to be. But that project at that time, when I started it, it was that there was this narrative, and imagine, right, this is like 2011, 2012 era. So we're talking about, Derrick Rose is kind of at the peak of his powers. Anthony Davis is coming out of high school and he's taking over Kentucky. Jabari Parker, Jahlil Okafor. There was all these kind of like big basketball names that kind of represent this golden era of Chicago high school basketball. There's still incredible high school basketball going on in Chicago, but at the time it was a certain level that was being hit, and at the same time there was this whole narrative about the gun violence in the city that,
which seems like it hasn't changed.
It hasn't changed a whole lot, but I'm just sort of informing where I was in that moment, and. Yeah. There were all of, so it was just these two extremes. It was the guys making it to the NBA and these kids that were suffering and dying. And so there was all these stories that were kind of falling in between. And I knew that there was this whole, between the extreme highs and those extreme lows, there was a lot of stories that were falling through the cracks. And I became interested in trying to tell that story.
It's so important.
Yeah.
It's so important. I think, especially even people within Chicago that live in certain neighborhoods will never meet some of these individuals that you showcased in Shot in the Dark, and to get a peek into their daily life and what it's like to be in these neighborhoods creates empathy.
Exactly. I would hope so.
Or at least some type of understanding and appreciation.
Well, for me, it was like knowing that, I grew up in Evanston. It was relatively privileged upbringing, and yet 20-30 minutes away from me, from my childhood home, there's a whole neighborhood and communities that were completely pushed to the edges of what could be deemed as safe and humanitarian. And it was a huge learning experience for me, just to learn what I call the discrete history of Chicago, which is the way that the city and the government created a system to oppress whole neighborhoods through redlining and through public housing and through all sorts of disenfranchisement, food deserts, and the lack of resources that created these neighborhoods, the construction of the highways, dividing the neighborhoods and isolating them, all of these different factors that over the course of generations created the Chicago ghettos. And our film is by no means, some sort of didactic soapbox to kind of talk about heavy political issues. We centered one school and two kids and a coach that were dealing with the repercussions of that system and how they were trying to push back against it. So
that scene where Coach visited just a grave, but it looked like someone's front, not even like a front yard, just like a corner, right? And
makeshift memorial.
A makeshift memorial. It's just powerful. It's so powerful.
Yeah, just that was a block from the high school.
And for him to persevere and continue to see the light in these kids and push them to persevere and show them what's possible. And I've spoken at some of these high schools regarding EMT stuff and what this industry and career can open up for them. And a lot of them, half of them are probably sleeping, not paying attention. And maybe you had a similar experience, but I also asked myself, without being too harsh on them, it's just I wonder if 16 or 18-year-old Victor would have listened to myself back then as well, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to write these kids off. And I think what a documentary or short form film can do is give you insight into more of who they are as a person and their family life. And it was heartbreaking to see was it Taekwon's mom like leave for work, right? It's just
Right.
like, first of all, some of these, kids, it's a broken family, right? So like the mom has to carry 2-3 jobs, so they can't be a mom because they're so gone.
Right.
And then it's just like you want your sense of community, belonging, and correct me if I'm wrong, it might be easy to find that on the streets.
Yeah, it's a heavy burden growing up for any person, it doesn't matter where you are.
Yeah.
The challenges of trying to figure out who you are and what you love and what you care about and what you're passionate about. That's hard enough in any context. Then when you put people in an environment with limited resources and few choices,
It's survival mode, right?
Yeah, it's really challenging. And I think something that I learned through the process of making the movie, and there's a great radio documentary or audio documentary about Harper High School that was really informative to how I approached the filmmaking. But I think that when I was younger and kind of how I was educated through like the DARE program as a kid, God forbid, but like was that these ideas of like gang initiations and these bigger gang culture that definitely existed in the 80s and 90s, 70s, 80s and 90s. But when the projects got destroyed, all the displacement that happened because of the projects getting destroyed, the structure of those gangs totally got
reorganized, right?
Yeah,
in the
just
sense,
redistributed and recreated. And so the kids that I was following through Shot in the Dark, they were like basically the first generation of kids growing up without the shadow of the projects over them. And so rather than these kind of bigger gangs, every couple blocks became another clique. And
so was there a purpose to them then?
Yeah, well, in Taekwon's context, or in the context of our story, it was just a group of friends that came together over the grief of losing two people. So two of their friends were killed and on their block, and they created a gang and a group and a clique around memorializing and remembering their friends, which is really sad, but also just the reality.
Like you get it, right? It's just like it was sad to see him get that jail tat, that prison tat on in someone's apartment, but I think I try to empathize of like, well, this is his group, and like this is their way of showing that they're connected.
Yeah, these were the people that that were right outside his door to a large extent. They were also the people that were giving him a sense of community and providing a level of camaraderie when he didn't have a whole lot in high school, outside of the coach and the team. But that's the tension of the film, right? Is those two worlds, and which path he'll kind of follow. That's how we kind of narrativized it, but it's also the reality of his life.
How much time did it take for them to trust you with giving you all this access? Because you can't be judgmental at that point, right? If you're going to film something, I wonder if you felt the urge to speak, but you had to hold your tongue, or
That it's a great question. I think that this is a question that a lot of filmmakers have to deal with, which is the question of the morals and ethics of filmmaking in general. When do you put the camera down? When is the right time to do that? In terms of building trust and building camaraderie with Taekwon and with the kids that we filmed at Orr High School for Shot in the Dark, it was I had a great piece of advice that was given, not to me, it was spoken at a screening from Albert Maysles, who's like one of the OGs of American verite documentary, observational documentary. He made Grey Gardens and Gimme Shelter, and he's passed away now, but I saw him actually at an anniversary screening of Hoop Dreams, and he said to the audience, a camera, and these are my words paraphrasing it, but the camera is an extension of love between you and the participant on camera. So to think you're not going to film anybody if you don't have some form of love that's going from you through the camera to the person. And I said it to Taekwon then, I've said it to other people that I film with, is that in terms of building trust, it's a matter of saying, hey, I want you to achieve your wildest dreams. Everything that you want in life, I hope that you get it, and I'm going to follow you on your journey to see if you can achieve those dreams. But if I'm going to capture those high highs, then you have to trust me to capture those low lows. And did he understand that? I think he understood it, but at the same time, it was just time. You know, I met him when he was 16, and I was 22, and then we filmed it for another 6 years. So at a certain point, he just kind of became comfortable with us. We were close to him in terms of like a friendship, brotherhood way, and we still are. You know, we still maintain a pretty good relationship. But
so during filming, would they reach out? Not just Taekwon, anyone, but like reach out for maybe guidance or advice or. For
sure, Taekwon was going through a lot of stuff, some of which we didn't even include in the film, and it's like not even wouldn't be responsible for me to put it in the film. It was stuff that extenuating circumstances that were all kind of crashing down on him, and for sure, like there were moments when you have to. It's a question that came up recently in a conversation I had with some filmmakers. It's that central question of when do you put the camera down? When do you know that this goes beyond just like whatever you're filming? And when we started, it was me and two other close friends, and we had, me and the cinematographer Ben Vogel, we had subletted our apartments in New York. We moved back in with our parents. We were doing this out of pocket, and we were 23, 24 years old, so we didn't know really what we were doing. We were just kind of like trusting ourselves. My dad was definitely questioning, like, what are you doing with this? Just going down to the west side of the city every single day for months at a time. But obviously it turned into something.
Yeah. And over time, what did you learn about these areas that most people will never step foot into?
There's a lot of joy in these neighborhoods. There's a lot of love. There's a lot of funny moments. There's a lot of lightness. But with it, there's an insurmountable amount of challenges and a great depth of humanity that I think is often overlooked when we can just read the headlines, read the numbers, read the statistics. But there's Coach Lou is the person that we, kind of centered and put in the film, and Taekwon and Marquise. But there's a lot of Coach Lou's out there, and there's plenty of Taekwons out there, and there's a lot of different people out there, but that there are people that are fighting to make a better version of this city.
Did Coach Lou ever leave Chicago? Or was he born and raised in Chicago?
He's actually born in rural Mississippi. Yeah, we have to give a huge shout out to Coach Lou. Yeah, Coach Lou's a really special person. He's now won a couple state championships, so he's got that monkey off his back, and he's at a new school now.
So he's not retired. I remember he was like questioning that. He had some like heart condition.
Yeah, he definitely had some health issues, and always talking about retiring, but impossible for him to retire. But yeah, no, he grew. There's a whole other story to be told just about Coach Lou. That's and we have these ambitions to do a scripted version of that story that are still
kind of similar to like a Coach Carter, but a documentary version.
Yeah, well, no, a scripted version. But anyway, we'll save that. But the point is that he grew up in rural Mississippi, and he, I think he won the state championship when he was a high schooler. He went on to play college basketball, and then he moved up to Chicago in the 90s. In the early 90s.
To the west side or somewhere else?
He actually moved to the south side. And yeah, literally the way he explained it to us is he was just playing street basketball to make money and started hustling, and then got involved in the streets. And then part of this is in the film too. That's when he got shot, and then kind of stopped and turned his life around and started to dedicate himself towards education and coaching.
I wonder if it's maybe not necessary, but it'll be easier. But like a Derrick Rose to like leave the city, do your thing, and then come back and make an impact.
Yeah, I think, Joakim Noah is not from the city, but I don't know if you've paid attention to what he's been doing. But Joakim Noah,
one city.
Yeah, which I think is incredible. But that, just in general, that, he's a New Yorker. You hear him talk, he's absolutely a New Yorker. But that he, even though he hasn't played in Chicago for maybe a decade now.
He'll be at games from time to time,
Yeah, he shows up for sure. But just that he's kept his foundation here.
With
Noah's Ark is the foundation. And then, the league that he just started, that's like a citywide league of club teams from across the city, which I think is amazing. But yeah, leaving is hard. Coming back is harder, I think. So.
No, I know Jamal Cole is trying to like raise money to install basketball nets.
I don't know Jamal.
Jamal, he's from My Block, My Hood, My City.
Oh, okay. I have heard of
And a lot of these hoops don't have nets. And he's like, what the heck? Like, this is a vessel, an opportunity for kids to, like, play and connect. And so he started raising funds, installing it himself.
As someone who, I don't play as much pickup as I used to. I used to play a lot more pickup. But playing on a rim without a net is... Whew, it's hard. There's no satisfaction when you make a bucket. You're like, did it go in? Everyone's like trying to figure out if it went in. It's really hard. You really need a net. Anyway.
I guess now we're bouncing back and forth, but like going back to your family meal at Hermosa, what was that experience like for your family?
The family meal that we had at Hermosa was incredible. Like I said, it was the first meal I had had with my family and my fiance since the pandemic. It was the first time we all sat inside.
What's your experience with fine dining?
I love it. It's not something that I do a whole lot of. I mean, I just generally broadly, I definitely am more drawn to like the mom and pop shops, the places that have been around forever, trying to find like old off the beaten path places. But I think like a good fine dining meal is basically like going to a good concert. You know, you go to a couple a year maybe and spend the high price for an experience that hopefully you'll remember forever. And so I've only done a handful of the kind of tasting menu, nicer upscale meals, but it's like I was in Mexico City a few years ago and we went to Pujol, which is like, I think it's number 9 or it's in the top 10 of best restaurants in the world.
Oh.
And he's one of the first Mexican chefs to get a Michelin star or however many. He's probably got more than one, but at any rate, it's supposed to be one of the best restaurants in the world. It is. And I went and I had that meal and I came out of it and I said, that was the best film I saw all year. You know, the storytelling that happened in those 12 courses was like on par with any kind of great
That's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
Storytelling, you know.
Have you done omakase before?
I did. My fiance Christina gave me an incredible Christmas present, and she got me omakase yume, which is
one of our faves.
Yeah, you've been there.
And someone asked me the other day. I had Mike Satin over for also known as Ramen Lord on, and someone asked, because it's like AAPI month.
Happy AAPI month. I tell everyone.
It's just like, how do you feel about, you know, a white person taking on this mastery of ramen and then making money off of it? And it's like, I don't care. Like, what? I'm sure some people care, but it's like, it's not easy. And that being said, he pays homage and has a huge amount of respect for the culture and the food. And he has written a free book that he's given on, it's in his Google Drive on how to make your own ramen at home.
Interesting.
He's not gatekeeping anything. Anyone can do it.
Right.
It's hard work though.
It's really hard work.
But he's teaching others how to do it for themselves. So if you really wanted to do it, go do it. And what makes me think about that is omakase yume, chef is Korean.
Right.
It's just like, does he not get any flack? or you know, Chef Otto from Kyoten, Vietnamese.
Right. It's a big question. I think it comes up in filmmaking a lot too. Who gets to tell what stories, you know? So who gets to cook what meals is kind of the extension of that. I think there's a responsible way to do it. I think that, you know, broadly people, we can get into some deep waters going down this path, but you know, there's a ethical and responsible way to kind of do that sort of work. Yeah. I don't know the chef's name, but the guy who does gaijin. Do you know what I'm talking about? In
yeah, he's
white.
white.
Yeah. Gaijin in Japanese means outsider. So here he is. He's acknowledging it. Gaijin is an outsider, a non-Japanese person, and he's doing, what's his okonomiyaki, right? Okonomiyaki, which is like Japanese street food. You know, this is.
I've heard great things.
I've never gone either.
But he was on the Joiners pod.
Cool.
Yeah.
So okonomiyaki's street food. You know, when I had it, and every city has their own regional version of it. And when I was in Japan, it's like diner food. You know, it's like we went in Osaka, and it was like lunch break. It was like all the construction workers, and I was in there with all the guys, and it's cheap food. And so here's a gaijin, here's an outsider who's calling out his outsiderness, and he's upscaling it, and he's charging a bit more for it. But I've heard it's great. Sure. I have no judgment. I think, yeah, who gets to cook what food?
But once you, especially if you're documenting the process, even these conversations, you gain some insight as well as an appreciation and maybe some respect as to how much work goes into it, even if it's not your original culture.
Sure.
And I'm sure you know, like hospitality, if you want great ingredients and you want to pay your team and a fair wage, it's like shit's not cheap, you know, and I think people in general do understand that.
I think so. I think if you're gonna be a white guy making some Asian food, it just better be good. You know, that's all I can say. It just better be delicious. But here, I have I don't know if you can call it a riddle, but I have a conundrum for you that I'll present. Sure. You tell me what you think, okay? So there's a restaurant in Brooklyn that shall not be named that it's a group of white folks that were trained in China, okay? And they got, I don't know if they went to culinary school or if they just did a big backpacking trip. I don't know. They went to China, they got schooled. They learned how to cook different styles of Chinese food. They came back to New York, they opened up a Chinese restaurant, and they served that food. Then, not 10-minute walk away, there's a Chinese family running a Chinese takeout restaurant doing General Tso's chicken, sweet and sour chicken, traditional Chinese, American Chinese takeout food. Those are Chinese folks making that. And then you got white folks over here making traditional Chinese food. Which one is Chinese food? Are they both Chinese food? What, you know what I'm saying? Like, what's the authentic Chinese food all of a sudden?
Exactly.
So I think that's a question. So I don't know. You better be good at it if you're going to do it, because I think the bar is going to end up being higher. The standard's going to be higher. And yeah, like the Asian diaspora is big and wide, and it's probably worth us maybe diving into a little bit about the Asian diaspora in terms of the overlap in experience between different Asian cultures and how that may impact how people approach their work. But, you know, of course, when I go into a Asian restaurant and I see a white guy in like a little kimono, and I'm like, of course, I'm going to be like, what's going on here? Like, what are you up to? Like, is this cosplay for you? You just like anime? Ooh. Like, what's going on? Of course, it's like a cultural appropriation. That would be the hot topic word. But, you know, you look at the backbone of many kitchens around this city and around the country, it's all Latin American, you know, in terms of the chefs. So, of course, you learn the techniques, you figure out how to do this stuff, go for it. I think the guy, you know, Pak in Portland, he shut down. He's a white chef who speaks Thai, lived in Thailand, learned from all the aunties. Whoa. But yeah, he upscales it, he charges a bit more. The food is damn good.
Right, now that was another question that I think David Chang and Ali Wong talked about. It's just like, why can't certain cultures' food be elevated, right? And who's going to be the one to do it?
It's for me, yeah, exactly. I think it's a really reasonable question. For me, it's like we have to get to the point where we could go into like an upscale, nouveau American French style restaurant, and there's a Chinese guy cooking, you know, steak frites. You know, that's where we got to get to. But that, you know, that, because it's always that question. It's like, it came up in a conversation I had yesterday. It's like Asian filmmakers telling Asian stories. It's like no one wins really until the Asian filmmakers are making the dumb all white cast broad comedy movies. Maybe I'm being a little facetious, but it is kind of a question. It's like, who gets to tell what?
Is there such a thing as like being too woke?
Yes. Yeah. I will.
Too politically, like, is there ever an end point of like trying to be too politically correct?
I think so. I also like the word, like, let's just take woke as a word, just to begin with, right? It's like the opposite of being asleep. But I believe stay woke, what came out of, if I remember correctly, and maybe we should double check this, but I'm pretty sure the idea of stay woke came out of the Ferguson protests, when the idea was stay woke as in keep your head on a swivel for the police. You know what I mean? Like for actual protesters, out, hands up, don't shoot, stay woke. Like keep your.
I didn't know that.
We got to look.
But I didn't. Even if it's not the origin, I just never even heard of that either.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So I want to like double check that, but I think oftentimes in terms of the optics and the performative nature of people's beliefs, it's who is it for, at a certain extent, like to at a certain point.
It's being
like,
mindful of who it's for.
Yeah. Well, who's the audience for this? Like, I understand having intentionality with what you speak about, but just as an example, and again, a little facetious, but in terms of can you be too woke, too politically conscious? I had friends that were doing outreach for unhoused folks, giving them meals and basic hygiene supplies,
Sure.
loading things up. They do it a Saturday morning in the park, and by 8 a.m., the line is really long. People are ready to get some food and supplies because they need it. These are people that need this stuff. But rather than accelerating, opening up the line, the group is going around in a circle, doing some land acknowledgements, introducing themselves, sharing space, kind of like doing the right thing, quote unquote. Yet, like the people that need the stuff are waiting and lined up around the block. So I think the optics of this stuff, that's where I question it for. It's like, I think the idea of land acknowledgements and certain of these ideas are healthy and they're smart and they're well intended, but who is it for? Like, who is this serving? And there's value in it. I can't say there isn't value in it, but it's sometimes I'm just a little.
It's exhausting.
Yeah, it's a lot. And it's not, I don't think, it's preaching to the choir type thing. That's often what I think. It's like people with the right politics already, they don't necessarily need this stuff, but it's like how we present these things and how we want to be seen as having the right viewpoint.
And when I guess when we say exhausting, it's just like, I'm not saying it's not worth it.
Right.
To try to see the perspective of other people, try to be mindful of other people. I don't know. It's just, but I also come in to meet people that are just constantly stressed out about life and all the things, because it feels like the world's on fire. And I feel like that's never ending.
Yeah, I think you're.
And there's so much out of your control.
Exactly. So what is the right wing called? The woke mind virus. The woke
Woke.
Yeah, the woke mind virus that are all infected with. And I don't really agree with that assessment, but at the same time, like, I understand how it all just seems a bit ridiculous. Because that's what I mean when you say, like, preaching to the choir. It's like you're just around a group of people that, in theory, all have the same perspectives of you, but it's like a sensitivity. It's wanting to make sure that you're being inclusive and you're doing all the right things. And I can be a team player, but I also understand how preposterous it can all seem sometimes.
Yeah,
when it's like, it just feels like I said, there's a line of people waiting for stuff that they need, and like here we are just like sharing space and doing and it's like,
come on.
like we can just get our hands dirty and actually start helping people. But at the same time, I get it. And it's, I don't know, if you would have taken you and I and gone back a decade ago and told us like how far left we've pushed in certain ways and how progressive, like I could sit here and complain about the Democrats and I could sit here and complain about the Republicans, but like I said, like if you would have looked a decade ago and talked about how in certain ways the country is pushed left, but at the same time the country is also pushed right, you'd probably be like, oh, this is good. Like, it's
a pendulum.
Yeah, exactly. So
coming back to filmmaking.
Yeah. Get off the woke mind virus.
No, I mean, I think about it a lot.
Yeah.
But what's your process? I remember you saying, especially with Shot in the Dark, it was important for you to get an experienced editor, which is where the magic happened, which is where the story comes together. But that being said, if the story comes together in post, how do you decide what to film then, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's all storytelling, right? But I think documentary editing excuse me, I think documentary editing, more so than any other part of at least non-scripted filmmaking, documentary editing is like writing. It's really where you write the story, right? You're literally taking the words that people said and setting them in a chronological sequence for emotional and narrative effect, right? That's like the most basic explanation.
So you go in without a narrative.
No, okay. So that's what I'm saying on the back end of it. I would say on the front end of it, a great piece of advice that was given to me by my mentor and advisor in school, Sam Pollard, who's like one of the great documentary filmmakers of our time. He said to me, and he probably doesn't even remember him telling me this, but it has had such an impact on me. When you're setting out on production, when you're at the very beginning of something, you look for the structure within the narrative arc within people's lives, the structure within people's lives. So take Shot in the Dark as the example. Within the structure of the people that I was filming's lives, we had a school year and we had a basketball season. So there's a beginning, middle, and end of those things. So you structure your shoot kind of around those beginning, middle, and ends. Okay. And then with Hermosa, the logic was, in terms of finding the structure at the beginning of the process, it was to look at the seasons, right? So to allow for the flow of the seasons and the change of his vegetables, we kind of started in cold weather, and by the end of it, we're hoping we emerge, and because he grows a lot of his own produce and grows a lot of his own herbs and vegetables, so we're hoping that by the end of the film, we're seeing him harvest stuff. So we start in the cold and then we end in the summer. So you're trying to look for the arcs already. Then when you start filming, all this other stuff starts happening. You start seeing all these other things. So there's a part of it becomes your gut instinct in terms of what.
Yeah, it's a lot of that, right? How do you decide like cinematography, like angles and things like that?
You try and create.
And probably like, and as a wedding photographer, people come to me because they like the fly on the wall kind of observational perspective.
Sure.
Is that as a documentary filmmaker, is that the go-to?
For me, yes. Okay. Like everyone has their own. Okay. I do consider myself an observational filmmaker. That's sort of my practice as a documentarian is to kind of be fully immersed and to find naturalistic, quote unquote, authentic. We could talk about what authenticity is forever, but trying to find authentic, real moments that feel representative of your life, that feel like it's not produced and it feels like this is just really happening. That's my MO. Like that's what I think one of my better strengths as a doc filmmaker is to capture those moments, just to have people feel comfortable and be open to it. But in terms of like stylistic choices, because to me those are almost two different considerations. Okay. But in terms of stylistic choices, I like to just you create a sandbox to play in, so you give yourself rules. So for me in that project in particular, I don't particularly like the way digital cameras look. Everything's always too sharp and too clear. For me personally, that has its appeal and it has its benefit for certain things. But for me, it's like I can always just see too much almost. So I have a really smart, talented friends that are much better cinematographers than I, and in particular, one of my buddies that's in my production company, Eric Yu. I had a long phone call with him where I was like, I just want it to look a little dirty. I want it to have a texture. And so he just gave me his kind of 2 cents on how to do that. So that was one part of the sandbox. It was like, okay, we're going to we just want to add a texture to everything that feel like you could touch the image ideally. And then I was like, and part of it was just to save my back and shoulders, but I was like, no handheld. We're going to go tripod the whole time. So there was a scene that I ended up having to shoot handheld. That was a scene where Ethan and his mom go grocery shopping. Could have been a great scene for the movie, and I think had you told me at the beginning, of course that scene's going to go in there with them shopping together for their 2 restaurants. But we had to shoot it handheld, so stylistically it just didn't match. It didn't fit with the rest of the vibe. And obviously, we did shoot a lot on 8mm, so that was something that was chosen at the beginning, and that was all handheld, the 8mm. Okay. But that was we were trying to recreate home movies. Sure. Recreate memories. So those were kind of the choices at the beginning that we made. We're going to stay on the tripod. We're going to shoot long lenses. We're going to add filters to kind of give it texture. And some of that is obviously the color correction that I did at a company here in Chicago called Nolo Digital that did a great job with the color correction as well. So previous to Cambodian Futures, working with other editors and filmmakers,
what have you carried forward into Cambodian Futures to allow you to do it by yourself?
It's a great question. In terms of my approach to production, I worked on 2 seasons of this Netflix series called QB1 Beyond the Lights, which is basically, it's the same company that made Friday Night Lights, but it's their documentary adaptation of Friday Night Lights. So we followed different quarterbacks, high school quarterbacks. So that's episodic storytelling, so it's a little different. But I really, that show, working on 2 seasons of that show, and then I've worked on a couple seasons of some other TV shows, doc series. That really impacted how I approach production. I, for better or for worse, can overshoot, and I still overshoot. I will always overshoot, but I can kind of be like, let's go. I had a filmmaker I work with call it like an expensive fishing trip. This filmmaker doesn't like expensive fishing trips. I don't want to do expensive fishing trips either, meaning you go out to sea, you don't really know what you're fishing for, and you're just trying to get whatever you can get in the net. When you're on a doc series and you're working with a crew, you can't do that. You have to be more focused and intentional. You create goals, you set a list of things that you're like, it'd be great if this week that we got XYZ, a dinner between father and son, the kid in school, in a classroom, like whatever the goals are, and so I tried to be intentional with when I was shooting with Ethan, because Ethan is also, as a chef, is very busy. He's got a lot going on. So we would come in about once a month for maybe 6 or 7 months, I think I would say. From November till June or July, we shot about once a month. And we try to be intentional. We try to be like, okay, here are 5 days. Here are the,
not wasting anyone's time.
I'd reach out to Ethan and be like, hey, here are the things that I would love to get. And he could maybe give me 2 or 3 of those. And I know that. So we book 5 days. Maybe we shoot 3 of them, trying not to do too much with it. And yeah, be intentional. And yeah, so much of that was influenced by those productions on those series that I worked on.
What was it like? I guess I'm gonna have 2 questions. Like so if I forget about budget, because you have self-funded many of these projects.
Yeah, well, this one was funded.
Right.
Yeah.
Cambodian Futures. And then the other question was, if I forget, is what was it like watching it with Ethan?
Ethan's so sweet. He can be very emotional in a nice way, and I'm like, is my filmmaking working, or is he? Because he cried, is what I'm saying. Ethan cried. He watched it. I think seeing his mom on camera that way and seeing them together, I think really affected him. So he seemed to be pretty taken by it. It's been a bummer just because his schedule is so crazy that we haven't been able to sync up and let him experience the film in a theater with an audience, because I think that's a really, the screening we had at the Siskel Center, which you attended, was such a wonderful screening. The presentation, the theater is beautiful. I said it that
first
night.
time, yeah, my first time there.
Oh my gosh, I think it's the best theater. Well, shout out to the Music Box, but I think it's the best theater in the city. The Siskel Center, Theater 1. And so to be able to screen there was incredible, and the energy in the room was so good, and you could feel it. Like the moments in the film, they kind of hit, and it's different than when you watch it at home. It just has a different feeling.
Yeah.
And it's just a bummer for me that Ethan hasn't had that opportunity yet. And he's been, we've been trying to sync up. We're going to get something going this summer. Well, obviously tell you so you can watch it for a 5th time if you're so inclined. But yeah, just to say that he responded really well to the film, and it was really positive, but I really want him to get that opportunity to feel the love from an audience in the room. Because it's just different, and I realize as I'm doing it, that's kind of my drug, is being able to share it with an audience.
I know that.
Yeah, I know some filmmakers, when their films come on, they want to go hide, and I get the feeling. You don't want to be in the room while it plays, but I always want to know if the things that I think worked when I was doing an all-nighter alone, in my editing suite in my apartment, and I think it works, then you see it work with a group of people watching it in the dark together. It's that's the, that's community. That's where you bring everybody together, and I love that feeling, and it's it's kind of a feeling I'm gonna keep chasing for the rest of my life. I know
that the scene where Ethan shares how much joy it brought him when he sees his mom be curious again, and I think that's a feeling that I think we all. I don't want to just narrow it down to Asian Americans, but maybe it's a child thing or an immigrant thing.
Happy AAPI month. And happy Mental Health Awareness Month. We got to share our month. You know that? We have to share our month. What about all the anxious Asians? I know there's a lot of them out there. So is this this is both of our month. We got to, I can't divide my mental health month with my AAPI month. I'm sorry. I love AAPI month.
But it's
been good for me this year.
I think personally, and I say this every other episode, I feel like it's just like we want our parents to be interested in our lives, and although it didn't take the natural trajectory of me going to med school or whatever and feeling like I'll just never match their expectation,
right?
A simple question of like, how did the wedding shoot go? How did that podcast go? And I know it's possible because my fiance's parents listen to every episode. And then
shout out to them.
My parents don't, right? So it's just like, it's unfortunate.
Right.
And to see that on the screen with Ethan's mom, even if she's like, it's okay. Or like whatever, it's just like,
all right. Yeah.
It's awesome. And what did that do for you when you saw that?
It felt really special. It felt like we had caught something.
Yeah.
It was like magic. It was like lightning in a bottle kind of a moment. So I'll say, like you were asking how we like structure the shoots and how we inform what we're going to shoot, all of the stuff with his mom, that all just happened naturally, in the sense that I kind of noticed that it was because I don't speak Cantonese, so that's already a challenge, right? So I'm filming these scenes and I don't know what people are saying, and so I got that first kind
of like relying on their like intonations of like how they're talking and like
I feel like I got a pretty good read on body language.
Yeah.
We're filming at least a couple of those scenes. We're filming with 2 cameras, so we know we have the coverage.
Okay, nice.
So it's like you're not gonna miss. We know we're not, unless we're not recording. But as long as we're filming, we know we're gonna get both sides of it. At least in that dinner scene and in some of those
like
scenes in the kitchen.
Yeah,
exactly. And so that kind of idea that his mom was a little. Or I guess I had known it in the interviews too, but at any rate, that idea that his mom was a little skeptical of what he was doing initially, and that now she is taken up an interest in it, and now she's cooking with him, I was like, there's a narrative arc. To go from her not really being interested or just being a little confused about what he was doing
to now participating.
To participating and then approving, that was like, I was like, there it is. There's the heart of the movie. And like, that was like when that clicked in, I was like, there it is. And then, so then it's like, for me, it's always about how you earn those moments, right?
Ooh.
So the moment, and we're spoiling a little, but go watch the movie. But that moment at the end when she tries the food, her approval, and maybe this is what you're talking about in terms of the kind of deeper Asian roots of the movie. I think many people are often contending with appreciation or acknowledgement from their parents, but it's obviously a deep theme within the Asian community, especially Asian immigrant families. I think in particular, just about approval from your parents. So I knew I had that moment where she's like, it's okay. Like, she tries the food, she's like, it's all right. And like, that's her approval. It was about reworking and engineering the story. So there's these kind of 3 to 4 moments where we're going to set up, I call it's an alley-oop, you got to set up those moments so that way when we get to it's all right, that final beat of the story, it hits you. It's funny, but it should be a little pull at the heartstrings a little bit.
And it did, yeah.
But it only works because of what he said in the speech just before that, and then before that, the moment you said when they're in the kitchen together, and then before that, I'm working backwards, and then to that moment in the restaurant when she's like, "I'm not traveling till you make money," and she's like, "Pfft, like, what are you doing?"
Right.
So it's like you start in that space, and then you're trying to build.
We'll go work backwards.
Yeah. Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, so I'm always kind of trying to find those moments, and then like, okay, if that's the potential of our movie, if that's like the emotional maximum potential of this idea, how do we seed it throughout the story? And like, that's at least for me. I know it sounds like I'm congratulating myself, but that's how, to me, I unlock the emotional arc of something that's only 16 minutes, but try and give the emotional impact of something that could be longer.
If you could have made it longer, how long would it have been?
I don't, there's a version of it that's a feature. I don't know if that would have been the strongest version of that story, but I could have easily done like a 20 to 30 for sure. I was contracted 15, and thank you Firelight Media and PBS American Masters for letting me go over my contract at 16 and a half minutes. But it was contracted to be a 10 to 15 minute piece.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And given the resources, that was realistic, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there were 2 of the films were 40 minutes. I think they were contracted to do longer projects.
Over time, have you learned how to stretch the dollar?
Yeah, well, doing everything yourself helps. Yeah. Oh yeah, you were asking about budget stuff. Doing everything yourself helps.
One of my favorite shows to binge and rewatch, Entourage.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Entourage. It just like
never
never. Yeah.
I mean, a little bit.
It's definitely like a super macho guy show, but at the same time, it's like it's a friend show. It's just like it's a circle of friends, and it's just like going through high highs and low lows.
Right.
And you know, obviously Hollywood stuff too, but yeah, it reminds me of like a director who knew how to stretch a dollar, I guess.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it is a skill set in terms of producing, you know, and how you can maximize what the production budget is. And
can you share the differences? So this one was funded by PBS, but the Shot in the Dark, it was initially self-funded.
Meaning we were just out of pocket, right? So we're doing it for free.
Is that the typical journey for at least people that are starting out?
I think a lot of people it is. It's unfortunate, but it's sort of the nature of it, unless you're going to be in the grant chasing world or crowdfunding.
What's that like applying for grants?
It's challenging, especially if you don't have a resume. I remember we were applying for a grant for Shot in the Dark, and we didn't get it. And then they announced the grantees, and one of them was Frederick Wiseman, who's like the greatest documentary filmmaker of all time.
That makes sense.
And it's like, well, geez, if I'm competing against Frederick Wiseman, the guy who like basically invented the modern American documentary, it's like we're screwed.
What are some of your favorite docs from him?
Oh, well,
I'm not familiar.
Oh, so he famously made this film called Titty Cut Follies, which is about he does like pure observation, like true from the 60s into he's still making movies. I mean, he's like got to be in his 90s. He's still making movies. Like recently, he just did like a 3 to 4 hour movie in the New York Public Library, just like straight observational footage in the New York Public Library. Did one in Jackson Heights, Queens. He's like the OG, but his big film here, his 2 breakout films was a film called Titty Cut Follies, which is a really intense observational documentary in a insane asylum.
Whoa!
And it's pretty intense. And then he's got, I think they're literally just called High School or School. Like, and that's the thing. He always does these kind of social documentaries about a specific place. Okay. So Titty Cut Follies is about an insane asylum. Then he did School 1 and School 2, or High School 1 and High School 2 that were just in a high school. Okay. And it goes on and on and on. So anyway, when you're applying for a grant and then you see that
it makes
Frederick
sense.
Wiseman's also competing for the same funds, like it's tough. So a lot of self-investment is required early on.
What did you do for work at that time?
I was still freelancing, but like I was doing the freelancing stuff with Rock Nation and doing stuff like that. But then we were getting donations from friends and family. We never did a Kickstarter, but like I had a good friend that was like knew we were traveling down to a tournament that we needed to film, and he just sent me a Venmo for hotel money, like stuff like that, staying with friends. That's why I said we subletted our places, so our cost of living had kind of gone down. So we had a lot of, privileges that not a lot of filmmakers can always afford. But I had been living in New York, and we just came back and doing laundry in my parents' house and splitting Pita Inn amongst 3 people. And
Pita Inn's the best.
Pita Inn's the best. Yeah, if you were born in Skokie, But you know what I mean? Just like doing whatever you could to get by, just putting in our own money, using our own gear, self-investing, and then eventually we were able to get financing for post-production and then sell the movie to Fox. And, that was a very shortened version of 6.5 to 7 years of production, post-production.
And when you're seeking these financiers out, the 2 names that came to mind were Dwayne Wade and Chance the Rapper.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that? Like, how do you bump shoulders with people that they're associated with?
Right. So in the context of Dwayne and Chance, the one thing I can say about them, neither of them gave us any money.
What?
Yeah, so they were both executive producers of the film. We had D Wade on first, and then Chance followed. But that was they just leveraged their names for us. You know what I mean? So they allowed us to use their names. They were Thai. So yeah, they just leveraged their names for
Can you clarify what EP credit then is?
Yeah, it's executive producer credit. We offered them the credit. So in exchange for the credit, they would help promote the film, participate in screenings, distribute it on their own social channel, like distribute clips and the trailer through their social media channels.
Doesn't necessarily mean money. That's interesting.
But it just helped. Like, so just an example, like I think Rolling Stone or Pitchfork, I can't remember exactly, but one of those publications picked up the trailer. Do you think with those publications pick up the trailer if Chance the Rapper's not attached?
Had they not,
no.
yeah.
Sports Illustrated picked up the trailer.
So it's invaluable.
It helps spread the wings of the project even further and just reach a different kind of audience for an independent film. So that adds a value that goes beyond money to me. And we brought that to the table. We had those relationships because, well, in the context of Chance, we had relationships with some of his team. We, particularly my producer Daniel Poneman had a relationship with some of his people. I had filmed with him, so I knew him a bit. We're talking like 2012. We're talking pre-acid rap, So we had sort of known, Chance had been kind of post 10 Day, had been around the city and people knew about him, but his star was kind of rising, and it seemed like a great partnership just in terms of what his organization Social Works had been doing, and so we kind of were able to pair it with Social Works, and Social Works co-sponsored our premiere.
You probably need at least the trailer, if not the whole thing, kind of like your own cut of it, so you have something to present to them, right? Or
Chance watched the whole movie. Wade, can't remember. The movie was basically done by the time Chance came aboard. I can't remember if Wade. I think Wade just saw. We had a 7.5 minute sizzle reel that was a preview of the movie. I'm pretty sure Wade saw that. But we had an agent from CAA who had been kind of chasing us forever. To represent the movie. To represent the movie and sell it.
That's a thing too?
For filmmaking.
Projects, not even just people?
Yeah, exactly.
They represent projects.
They'll represent a project, exactly. Big agents or big agencies will represent a project and try and sell it. So they might not even represent.
So what do they get a cut of it?
Exactly. So they'll get a percentage of the sale. And then in theory, they're leveraging their contacts for you that we wouldn't have. Yeah. And so in the context of Wade is represented by CAA, we had kind of been like, no offense to all the agents out there, but they're kind of like flies buzzing around. We're like, buzz off, go away. We can do this ourselves. We're being a little stubborn. We were also, again, in our mid-20s. We're like, we can do this ourselves. And then separately, again, shout out to Dan Poneman, but he had a relationship with someone in Wade's camp.
Cool.
But then it all kind of came back full circle, where it was like that CAA agent who had been chasing us was like, wait, I heard you're talking to Wade's people, and he like made it all kind of come together because Wade is represented by CAA.
And I'm sure Noah would have been down for it too.
Oh yeah, I mean, we had a list of guys that would have been Noah. Yeah, that would have made sense. I think had you told me when we started like borrowing my dad's car in 2011 that we'd partner with Dwayne Wade and Chance the Rapper. Well, I didn't even know who Chance the Rapper was in 2011 probably, but like but had you told me that like and then we'd get national distribution and be on every TV of that had Fox in the country, it would have been wild to think about, but yeah, Wade and Chance were both great partners and came to screenings and
what have you learned about like the business side of things, navigating contracts and deals that you wish you may have learned in school?
Yeah, I'm still learning it. I have great producing partners that are much better at that part of the process than me. I'm trying to get better at it, but yeah, they don't teach you that stuff in school. You're right. School is more about the craft and technique, which is also important in finding your voice.
Is school required?
Yes and no. Yes, because I think it's important to have a space where you can just get after it and just try and fail and do things and mess up in a environment that's safe and supportive. Not that film school is always the safest or most supportive environment. It can be pretty competitive as well. But at the cost,
What's the cost?
When I went, it was $50,000 a year. Now it's $75,000 a year. I think. And so you're talking about close to $250,000 after 4 years. And
what could you have accomplished with that money on your own?
You probably could have made a couple movies, or at least a movie. But you're 18, you don't know anyone, you don't have any relationships.
So it's a network thing
so
too.
Part of it is the community. I still am working with one of the producers that I work with at PBS. I went to NYU with. So like in terms of the network and being like, okay, you're 18 now, you're in New York, go figure it out. Like that stuff is invaluable. So like I was basically paying to be in the city. I'm lucky. Hey, I took out a lot of loans. My parents remortgaged their house right before 2008 to let me go to school. So I'm very grateful for having those kinds of privileges that allowed me. They didn't pay out of pocket, but they helped cover it. And, so yeah, the debt is huge. But I don't regret it,
Nice.
I don't regret going. So could you just go out and let the world be your school? Absolutely. If you're still trying to find your voice and you're still trying to figure out what you're interested in, and you want to find other people that are also interested in those things and also care about the same things you do and like all the weird esoteric movies that you like too, go to school for it and find the other weirdos that you want to work with, and it may benefit you in the long run. So there's pros and cons.
I like that. I like that. Were there other schools that you were considering?
At the time, I guess there was.
You said you really want to get out of here, though, too, right?
I was ready to go at the time. I did NYU early decision. So if I didn't get into NYU early decision, I would have had an awful winter break of applying to all the schools that I had put off. But I was looking at some other schools in the Northeast. Hampshire College, which would have been bad for me. Just because it's like there's no majors. It's like a hippie school. You have to have a lot of self-discipline to go to a school like that.
And even at this time, like, how were your parents in helping you grow? Like, did they have a goal for you, like a specific career for you, or were they just supportive in anything that you were trying to do?
Yeah, I'm lucky. My parents are super supportive.
And what's your cultural background?
Yeah, so my mom is Japanese American. So my mom was born in Chicago. Her grandparents were the ones who immigrated pre-World War II. So they immigrated around in the 20s, I think, in the late teens, early 20s, pre-World War II.
Which is how you guys connected, you and Ethan connected with, like, was that their experience with the internment?
Yeah. So my mom's side of the family was interred during World War II. And then my dad's my dad is the first person in his family to come to the States. So my dad was born in India, was forced to move to Karachi, Pakistan in 1947, 1948 during the partition of India, the largest forced migration in human history, 15 million people.
I'm not aware. That's crazy.
Okay, yeah. Well, we could get into partition.
No, yeah,
history,
we don't have to.
But in brief,
wow,
the British leave India. Civil war violence, or within the country breaks out between the Muslim and Hindu populations, and they decide to partition part of India to create Pakistan, and then they further partition Pakistan to create Bangladesh about 30 years after that. So Pakistan only came to be in 1947, and so my dad is Muslim. His side of that whole side of the family is Muslim. They were in India, and my grandfather, my dad's dad, was an artist and a teacher, a painter, and he had, I don't know, some sort of relationship, some sort of connections. There was a lot of violence happening between the Hindus and Muslims. A lot of people were dying. It's very dangerous to travel to try and get across that border to get to quote-unquote safe haven. So Muslims were dying, Hindus were dying. It's just a very dangerous, scary time. And somehow my grandfather, through his connections, was able to get boat passage from where they lived in India into Karachi, because train travel was supposedly very dangerous, or it was very dangerous at the time. So my dad was the first person in his family to come to the States. He moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana in 1960 to become an engineering student.
Wow.
Then he went from Fort Wayne, Indiana to Tulsa, Oklahoma.
How old was he when he came?
19.
Wow.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing is, like, when you were a refugee at that time, all the records went out. So there's your like government birthday, and then like what could be your real birthday.
Holy shit.
So yeah, he came when he was like 19, 20 years old to Fort Wayne to be an engineer. Then he goes to to Tulsa, Oklahoma for another Stillwater, Oklahoma, somewhere in Oklahoma. He went to school in Oklahoma for a year to keep pursuing his education to be an engineer. Idea being that you get your education to be an engineer, and then you move back to Karachi and build bridges and build build Pakistan, this new country. And he took a summer job that year in Chicago and then never left.
Oh, okay.
So he went from being an engineer and then he became a social worker. My dad's been many things in his life, and then he became a social worker.
Wow.
And then later in life, now he's a writer, and he's an editor, fiction writer, and he's still, he's in his 80s. He's still working. He does. He's the editor for this amazing literary magazine that's been around now for like 30 years called the Chicago Quarterly Review, that he's the founder and editor of. So all this to say that, and then my mom is a painter by hobby. Her father, my other grandfather, was a photographer with a dark room and by hobby.
So huge appreciation for the arts.
And a painter by hobby. So I feel really lucky that like there's a lot of artistic. Well, on my dad's side, my grandfather was a professional artist and a teacher, and then on my mom's side, everyone was like kind of like hobby artists.
That's so cool.
So I felt like I was lucky. I had a lot of support to kind of do what I wanted. I'm sure if you talk to them, there was some skepticism about doing what I was doing and concern. But I remember I told my mom at like a very young age, like, I'm not gonna work in a cubicle. Like I told her when I was like 10. I was like, I will never work an office job, and was like very defiant about it. And yeah, I kind of bore true. You know, I always wanted to be in control of my own schedule and be in control of the types of things that I do and work-wise. And yeah, it causes limitations. It causes its own challenges of not having, you know, consistent, steady work. Some weeks are really busy, and then other weeks I'm just twiddling my thumbs and playing Zelda at 8 a.m. So it just all depends on what's going on.
So how do you make it then? Like if you don't have such a steady job, you just keep contracting, or is there going to be a big payday one day? Or
I hope if you're out there and you want to pay me that big payday. No, it's a balance, right? So I have good relationships with companies that I freelance with. So I have one show I work on this. Actually, it's a UFC show for ESPN that I help produce. I'm one of the producers on, and that show, there's about one episode a month, and so you know, one day out of the month I go do that, and that, you know, keeps my head above water and keeps the bills paid, and then I try and pick up other gigs along the way. And so I've been doing that. I've been doing that UFC show now maybe for 2 years, and then, you know, then I'm always trying to chase down other jobs. It's this balance, right? Because the shows are good because they're consistent. There's generally a lot of work, and generally they pay pretty well, and then at the same time you're trying to balance with like the projects the creative projects that I want to get off the ground and the stuff that I want to get funding for. And so I have a handful of those ideas, so it's always this balance. And ideally you can do if I work a handful of days out of the month, then I can spend the rest of the month focusing on those other things and trying to get those other projects funded or whatever. And yes, trying to get to that point where one of those passion projects, one of those projects you really care about, can get funding, and then you can use that to jump to the next project and the next project. Sure. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Can you speak on what it's like to apply to the festivals?
Firelight Media, who is the producer for the Ethan Lim film for Cambodian Futures, they have a lot of great relationships with festivals, so it was really nice to work with them because they just they helped facilitate the Big Sky screening for the whole series, which was incredible. And then it's nice. Like it's not easy. It costs money, and you try and ask for the waiver codes, and you try. It's like I hate to say, but sometimes it's kind of like a popularity contest, it feels like. So we've had a nice run with this film. You know, I think we've been somewhere around 7, 8
Is there
festivals.
Is it limited to only films that were made recently? Like you can't just keep submitting, or how does that work?
Generally, it depends on the festival, but generally they have this film must have been produced in the last 18 to 24 months. Usually, that's usually the rule, because they want new, quote unquote, new work. New things, and so I got into some festivals, and then once your film kind of goes around a couple of the festivals, the programs kind of pay attention to that stuff, and then you get invited to submit to some other ones. I just came back from San Francisco 2 weeks ago. I was at CamFest, which is the Center for Asian American Media, which is a festival. It's a food, music, and film festival. It's been around for, I think last year was their 40th anniversary. So this is their 41st year of doing the festival, and it's an incredible mixture of not just films, but they do food programming and they do concerts and all this sort of stuff. And that was and it's in San Francisco, so which is a huge Asian American community, and it was a lot of fun. I came off of a shoot, so I missed a lot of the fun stuff, but it was great. We won the Lonnie Ding Award for Social Issues Documentary, which is, I think it's public now. I think it wasn't public before, but I think it's public now, which was a really cool honor to get, just to be in the legacy of all these other filmmakers. So for me, this festival run has been really impactful, just to like connect with other filmmakers, connect with other artists, and kind of build that sort of camaraderie and meet other people that are in a similar grind and doing the same sort of thing, and seeing other new work, and getting in, I always come back like super inspired and invigorated to like get back to my stuff and get back to my ideas after I come back from those festivals. So there's nothing immediate on the horizon. Oh, we just got into the Cambodian International Film Festival, which is really cool. So that'll be
where's that hosted?
In Phnom Penh. Which I'm not going, unfortunately, but I think that's next week. So that'll be our international premiere, and that's pretty exciting.
I wonder, has Ethan mentioned having people come in for family meal after learning or like seeing it on the documentary?
Yeah, we're getting lunch next week, and I have a feeling he's gonna read me the riot act. We'll see what he has to say. But no, I do know that it not even just the film coming out, but Eater wrote two really nice articles. One more so about Ethan and the restaurant, and I had a couple quotes in it. And then they also wrote a nice article about the film, and they premiered the film on Eater. And he said even after that article came out, his inbox was just going crazy. Yeah. So, he's very diligent and deliberate. You should have him on here, but he's very diligent and deliberate with how he approaches the reservations in terms of when he opens up the reservations, because it's very popular and the wait list is pretty long. So I don't know if he's opened up for the summer yet. And so he said it's been like he's trying to decide how he's going to do it with like much higher demand. And he added a second table, but it's still only, I think, a maximum 10 people a night. But then he's also doing the prefix. My cousin got the prefix yesterday or the day before. It's much more affordable and seemingly
as opposed to what?
The family meal. So family meal, you just pay for it and you choose it. The prefix, you choose 4 courses and it's $50 a person or something like that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but that ticket is even. I did it last summer.
It's still pretty sold out.
It's still really hard to get, and but he does it for lunch too.
Oh,
there's dinner seatings, but then he also does it for lunch. And it's much more affordable because the family meal is expensive. I mean, it's great, but it's like not the. It's like going to these fine dining establishments.
It is. It is. I went to, maybe 2 years ago. We went to Ever, and I mean that was probably $250 a head.
Right.
So
right.
Or omakase yume. One of the best experiences of my life. But I would say after walking away from family meal at Hermosa, the elevatedness as well as the down-to-earthness is very much there. And there's a scene where his mom felt like she didn't belong at a fine dining restaurant, and that impacted him a lot. And
it feels like home cooking in a way.
It does.
It's hearty food. It's like sometimes you get those fancy tasting menus and
it's just like
it's just like a little dainty thing
right.
and you don't necessarily walk away stuff. You walk away from Ethan's restaurant and you're like, ooh, I just ate a lot of food. Wait, I wanted to ask about your omakase yume experience. Was it like very serious in there?
I've been like 3 times.
Amazing.
Been 3 times, which 2 of the times there was a girl that sat in the corner, showed up late, but would get 2 of everything.
Huh.
I don't know if you've experienced the same thing, but she got 2 of everything and then just leaves. And I'm like, who is she? Like,
but she ate it? She
ate everything.
Yeah.
But serious in the sense that, chef is serious.
Yeah.
And I think
kind of feel like you have to like library whisper a little bit. Like I felt a little uncomfortable talking out loud, but I did end up speaking. But
we didn't get shit faced, but like we were on some sake, so we're just like we're having a good time. Yeah,
okay, good.
One time we brought our friends, so it's like 4 of us, so that's like more than half the space, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, we just rewatched Jiro Dreams of Sushi.
Oh my god!
Yesterday, and I hadn't seen it since it came out, and it's great. It's such a good movie, but like. Jiro just like stands there and stares at you, and it's the most expensive meal in the world because it's like $400 and
Yeah.
you're out of there in 15 minutes. But Omakase Yume wasn't that extreme in terms of the seriousness, but I was like, damn, I feel like I'm kind of like in a library. Like I don't want to offend anybody. But yeah, same thing. Like a couple came in late and they had missed like the first 3 or 4 courses, and they were like,
They still let them in?
they still let them in, and like they were like on their phone, and I was
Fuck
like,
that.
I was like, give some respect. And then they circled back and they got those first courses. And then like one of the people asked for like less rice, and I was like, you can't ask the chef for less rice. And then I was like reading that I guess like if you're starting to feel full, that's what you can tell the chef at an omakase thing.
That's what being too woke will get you. Fucking.
Yeah, too much rice. Yeah, if being too woke means too much rice, then hey, consider me woke.
Yeah, I'm trying to when my buddy graduates the fire academy or at the CFD, but we're trying to get Kyoto next door.
Nice.
Which is like his like second.
Yeah, I haven't been
place.
there, but yeah, I was talking to them about it. They said he it's the same ownership.
Yeah, Chef Otto.
Yeah,
Chef
and
Otto.
they had like a unagi pop up that
Oh.
I was like, ooh. It was like they brought in some like unagi master from Japan to do. You're talking about the one directly next door?
Directly next
On the
door. It's on Instagram. It's called Kyoto Next Door.
Yes, right.
And it's a little bit more casual and a little bit more affordable.
Right.
I remember talking to him. He came on pre-pandemic, maybe 3 years ago.
Oh, cool.
And 3-4 years ago. But yeah, he comes off as arrogant.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and
Sort of
but
serious
it's
about it.
serious. Doesn't really care for the awards. Just wants to do good work and wants to do good sushi.
Yeah,
And
I respect that.
and he also shares that like he doesn't care for people that come in on a one-off opportunity for a birthday or an anniversary, because he has clients that come in every week.
Wow, really?
He doesn't have to fight for seats.
Yeah. Well, it's only 8,
And,
right?
It's like not 8 or 9.
8.
And when the pandemic happened, he increased prices to like $500, $550.
Wow.
And he's like, I have no plans on bringing it back down.
Wow.
But Kyoto Next Door is going to be like the more affordable version.
Yeah, the more casual version. I'm going tonight. We're going to Momotaro. Which
Nice.
I've never been there before.
Yeah.
But after watching Jiro, it was like, oh, geez.
I've
I need to
been
go get some sushi.
once to Momotaro, and then there's a basement thing,
Right.
the little casual space down there.
Yeah, I've never been.
It's
Yeah,
cool.
I'm
It's cool.
excited.
That's all I have for you, buddy.
It's been great.
We're approaching
Yeah, we're past 90 minutes here.
hour 30. What a pleasure. I remember you saying at the screening you're working on something in Rogers Park. What can we look forward to from you?
Yeah, I got a couple projects kind of like juggling, trying to get off the ground here. It feels like the industry's in a interesting place post pandemic. I think there was this idea that we were in the golden era of documentary.
Pre-pandemic?
Like maybe the peak of the golden era we could say was The Last Dance. Let's just say,
Oh
like,
my God.
in hindsight now.
What'd you think? Did you liked it?
I mean, a huge basketball fan.
Yeah.
I have some like potential grievances just in some of the filmmaking approach, but I think that, and it's just tough because like Jordan is only going to be in this if he kind of has some control over it. And just personally, like that doesn't, like, of course, if I had the opportunity to make The Last Dance, I would have done it, and I probably would have, whatever you want, Mr. Jordan. But like objectively, I want something that's a little bit less, feels like a Jordan commercial.
More of
sometimes.
a Bulls, yeah.
Well, just like I just want to get into a little bit of the nitty gritty of all the crazy gambling and just some crazier stories that I know are out there that no one wants to talk about. But of course, like, it was awesome and it's well done and it's incredible. And we were all stuck inside and there was no sports and it was kind of like the perfect moment. But I guess that maybe in hindsight now we can look at as that was like the peak of the quote unquote golden era of documentary.
Oh, okay.
In terms of the price that people were paying for these things, like the cost of them. And now we're the festival director at Big Sky in Montana. It's her quote. She said, "We're past the golden era of documentary. Now we're in the age of consolidation." Right. So it's like Showtime's going underneath Paramount Plus. All this craziness.
Oh yeah,
going
like
on
Disney and Hulu. Yeah.
Yeah, all the craziness with HBO and Max and TNT and Warner and all of that messiness. So like I've had some projects that have gone on ice because of that. Like projects that we shot, like projects that are fully shot, not necessarily all done editing, but like we went out for months and made these things, and they are just sitting on people's hard drives. So there's just been like, it's like a weird space now. The economy is also kind of like taken this turn that's been disconcerting in all these different industries. I had someone say to me that like, are we in the recession right now, or is it that like each industry will have its kind of like micro recession, like one industry that it'll just impact, you know, the car industry, or it'll just impact the entertainment industry. So anyway, long way of saying that like the industry is kind of in a precarious place. So I had a project that fell apart during the pandemic that I was doing that I'm trying to reassess towards a short film, and then I have another project that I'm producing that I'm really excited about, that we're looking for financing. It's been tough just to like kind of find a good partner for that. And then
what's an ideal partner for a producer?
Someone that it's a balance of things. Someone with experience. So I'm working with two young filmmakers that are very talented, Nico and Zach, that are really great. But it's their first film. So partnering with people that have experience is important. People that can kind of maximize. We're always talking about maximizing the potential, because the idea is really strong. It's about a relationship between a father and son, and it's about space travel, and it's about a lot of, and it's documentary. It's a lot of different elements that are very universal, but they're set against the backdrop of modern space travel, which is...
Ryan Reynolds had a Netflix movie recently with that.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Yeah. Time travel.
Oh, time travel. Well, this is space. We're staying in this dimension, but yeah. But so at any rate, working with people that have some experience, people that understand the scale of what we want, which is, it's a bit ambitious, but I think it's possible. So you want people that understand it and
it's
trust
not just
it.
money. It's experience too.
Well, it's also money.
it's also money.
It's also a lot of money. It's also that they have the money to pay for it. And then,
so what's it like being in Chicago then? Do you have to be in a certain area to bump shoulders, or?
Well, that's the thing, is the majority of the industry is going to be in New York and LA, and the industry has a bi-coastal problem, and that's fine. That's fine for me. Like, of course it's going to be in New York and LA. Like, the majority of my work is coming from New York and LA. That I know is kind of going to be the thing. I hope that like kind of putting some form of roots down here while still always looking at like, should I move? Should I get back to New York? Because I do miss it. I have a lot of people out there. Should I move to LA? Should I do something new? It's like always this kind of thing, but then also looking at Chicago and trying to, build the city up and trying to tell stories here that matter, and get into more, like I said, community-based storytelling that, like, Rogers Park for me is like infinitely inspiring. So I'm kind of looking at this new project about the influx of immigrant and refugees. Rogers Park has always been...
I was just thinking that too.
Yeah.
Oh, but like specifically to Rogers Park?
Yeah, Rogers Park has always been a huge community for
migrants,
always, like throughout its whole history. But recently, there's been a huge influx of refugees that have come into Rogers Park in the last maybe 5 years.
Is this related to like the Central and South American refugees?
Everything. So conflict in the Congo, conflict in Central America, Latin America, the Afghanistan war, the war in Ukraine, any sort of global
Rogers
conflict.
Park, huh?
And so Rogers Park is kind of, so there's this high school, Sullivan High School, that's become a sanctuary school for all of these different and all these immigrant and refugee societies, groups that are helping place them in homes and place them in apartments and help them get set up. A lot of that is all happening in Rogers Park and around the city.
It's very cool that they can make these decisions even without a lot of red tape, it seems like.
I don't know how it feels. Like there's probably a lot of red tape, but yes, you're right that like there is a lot of flexibility, and there's in Rogers Park, and it generally is being very welcoming to this new influx of folks, because like Sullivan High School was at risk of closing, and they were able to kind of reposition the school by bringing in all these refugees. Now there's 50 plus languages spoken in the school, so it's creating all these other logistical and cultural issues. But at any rate, I became really interested in trying to tell as many of those stories as I can. So finding a couple of stories that'll be the core stories, but trying to weave together kind of a mosaic film of all the different stories. So that's like, between that and a couple other ideas, like that one's like the one that's like, if I could make that and do that locally and spend the next year plus kind of pursuing those stories and accumulating footage, and I'm applying to some funds and applying to some places to try and get some money for that would be great, and then at the same time trying to find funding for quote unquote more commercial things. Like my dream, I brought it up yesterday, but I have to keep saying it out loud to make it happen.
Manifest.
But, yeah, the dream project, just in terms of like a more quote unquote commercial project, would be to do a documentary on Ichiro Suzuki, the baseball player.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's like something that I've also kind of like very, very early stages trying to like poke around and see what's possible for something like that.
Yeah, because there's like that one opportunity to ask. I think I slid into Joakim Noah's DMs. I'm like, Joakim, like I'd love to like hear more about your One City project. Just take your shot, right? And but there is like a good time to take your shot too.
Exactly, and who you're going to? Like, is it directly to the athlete or directly to the public person? Is it through the agencies, through the managers?
Stuff,
It's like which part of where do you have a meaningful connection? He's in particular is a very private person. So
another one I tried reaching out to. Her name is Dr. Alita, but on Instagram it's Inglewood Barbie.
Oh yeah,
right. She's been sleeping under the viaducts with her friends, and I asked her to come on, but her PR manager was like, not a good fit at this time, and I'm like, well, thanks for responding, but okay, whatever, it is what it is.
Yeah, that's too bad. Yeah, she's been doing some good stuff. I don't know her personally, but I have some friends that are connected to her. So
there's so many cool stories to share. I wonder if you're facing like even like translation issues, communication issues, because every police station, the one closest to me, still people are just sleeping outside. It's so full on the inside, people sleeping on the outside. It's such a paradox that we're currently living in.
Yeah, it's a really hard and challenging time. I keep asking my dad. I was like, was it this bad in 1968 when it was this bad in the 70s during the Vietnam War? And he's like, yeah, it was. There was a lot of upheaval then, but it feels like we're in this moment where it's just the conflicts of issues all stacked on top of each other.
Wow.
Whereas, like,
which ones do you tackle first,
Yeah, well, it's like, the environment, the climate collapsing, social welfare issues,
but
healthcare
then
issues.
The other day, I talked with a coworker who's trying to renew his wife's green card, and that's been a process. And he's like, it's so slow because there's so many people in front of them.
Right.
But how is the government dealing with the busloads of people coming, whereas the people doing it legitimately,
Yeah, it's a mess.
While trying to provide basic necessities,
right?
Food, water, medical health, like.
Yeah. I mean, there's. I've been freelancing on a really powerful project with a filmmaker named Margaret Byrne, who's been doing this insanely ambitious documentary series. She's been filming for over 4 years on her own. She's gotten some grant money. She's been self-funding it, all about police corruption in Chicago. And I don't know if you've paid attention to it, but in the last 2 years, there's been a huge amount of overturned cases from police misconduct from the 90s. So people that were innocent, wrongfully convicted people that have been imprisoned for
because some cop
30 years. Not even fucked up. They intentionally incarcerated people, fake evidence, all this kind of wild stuff that you're like, that sounds like an episode of The Wire, but it's been happening in the city for like 30 years. So she's been following all of these people as they've been going through their trials and getting freed and all this stuff. But anyway, the point is that like we were filming outside the courtroom, and like a guy just saw our cameras and just started like ranting towards us. And it wasn't even, I don't even know if it was on camera, but he was saying the government keeps sending all this money to Ukraine, but where's the money for us? And like, I was like, I kind of understand what you mean. It's like, how are we allotting our resources? Where do our resources go? Like, there's these global conflicts that are happening all around the world.
It's the military-industrial complex.
Yes. And scene. Leave it at that. How about that?
Yeah. No,
it's like the more you know, with like the rainbow star.
Yeah.
Like the military-industrial complex. Ding. Like, how inspiring.
If you want to be found, where can people find you?
I'm right here. You can find me. I'm right. Come get me. I don't know. I'm Googleable. I suffer on these apps with the rest of us. You won't find me on TikTok, but yeah, I got some banger tweets out there, some Instagram stories that. No, I can't even say this stuff seriously. But yeah, I would appreciate
because you have your own production company too, Bogey, right?
Bogey Films is the group of guys that we all came from NYU together,
Nice.
and we kind of pool our projects there together. But yeah, 2 of those guys are in Brooklyn, and then the other guy is in LA. But we are still trying to keep the ship together. But yeah, no, this has been great. I appreciate you having me on. I hope people can go check out the Ethan Lim project. Otherwise, you'll get a bad AAPI month curse. I don't know if they know this. If you don't support Asian American stories, there will be some sort of Jin curse ghost Asian American curse that'll come get you.
It's cool to have a month. There's so many different themes for every month, but it's like
it's cool to have a month.
To go off the rails a little bit, it's just like, what if you were awarded something simply because you were Asian or simply because you were black?
Yeah.
Did you I wonder if they question did I really deserve it then? If you narrow the pool that they're drawing from.
Well, I don't know, but I do know that this is the first project that I did with strict, very obvious Asian themes, right? So this is the first time that there's all these amazing organizations. I don't know any of these people. I feel like I have a pretty long resume. I have pretty good experience working in the industry. But with this project, it's the first time I've really been introduced to other Asian filmmakers, seeing other Asian stories, being at Asian film festivals, being part of the Asian American showcase that Fame did through the Siskel Center. So this is the first time I'm kind of dipping my toes in those waters, and honestly it's been really awesome, and it's been inspiring just to see the solidarity, see the overlap of themes within the projects, just to meet other artists that are interested in similar ideas thematically. And yeah, we all happen to be Asian, so it's great. It's it is a little, I get what you mean, it is all a little silly, and that's why I keep on wishing everyone a happy AAPI month, and it's what does it all mean? But no jokes, this has been the busiest AAPI month I've had in my life. Went to a handful of festivals. I've been asked to speak on a bunch of things. It's been, I'm is every May, will every May be like this now? No, and I have to keep doing things. But, it's, I understand, there's value in it. I can be cynical about it. I can make fun of it, and I do, but at the same time, I'm really grateful for the types of opportunities that it opens up, and the types of people like you I get to meet. And we could have done this in June also. We didn't have to do it.
Yeah, no, I wasn't.
But I know you were looking at your calendar boy, we better get this podcast
not
in.
Even. I haven't mentioned AAPI maybe once at the screening, but prior to that, it's it is what it is.
I know.
Right?
I know.
It is what it is.
I'll be honest. I did not know it existed until this year.
We can just appreciate good work.
Here, well, this is public, but maybe you'll cut it out. But I'll have to ask your opinion. I have a gallery of really racist Asian things that I've seen, and I'm debating whether or not I should put it on social media and say Happy AAPI month.
Racist on whose behalf? Who's?
Well, okay, I'll give you a specific example. I was at a sushi restaurant in Latin America, and there was that's its own thing. And there was a sushi roll on the menu called Nagasaki Atomic Roll, and
oh
yeah,
shit.
I was that's not cool. That's like going to a
no.
I can't even say what I want to say, but
no.
it's it's a war crime dish. That's not cool. So I have that. I was in Germany, and so a lot of it is anti-Asian sentiment from other countries where they don't even think they're being racist, which is the most racist thing about it. But I was in Germany, and it was just someone handing out Chinese takeout menus, but with a really, for lack of a better word, chinky caricature of a Chinese person with the Fu Manchu and the squinty eyes.
Sure.
All the sorts of Orientalism. So I'm should I be that guy that's Happy AAPI month and just post all the progress we haven't made,
So I came across someone's story who said that people that are profiting off of Asian Americans owe Asian Americans some money.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. Well, I will say, in Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote that incredible article, now maybe a decade ago for The Atlantic, The Case for Reparations, about Black Americans. But the example that he used, because my family benefited from it, was the reparations that the Reagan government gave to the Japanese Americans in the 80s for the internment.
What did they give?
I can't remember exactly, but I think each surviving family member maybe it was by family. Each surviving family or family member, very easily Googleable. So I could be wrong. Either individually or each family got 30 grand.
But reparations were given.
Yeah, 30 grand.
I didn't know that.
That's not a small amount. That's
No,
a decent check, and that's 4 years of their life. We're talking about Black Americans that were subjugated for multiple generations and were enslaved for hundreds of years. So
that first film at the screening was pretty good. The Cubs. Yeah, the grandpa with the Cubs.
Nisei, yeah, that was cute. Go Cubs, go.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I had, an uncle that served in World War II while his family was incarcerated at the same time. It's crazy.
That's so fucked.
Yeah.
God.
It's like ridiculous.
They ran out of bodies.
Yeah. American history.
The
military industrial complex.
Okay, we'll cut it there.
Okay.
Dusty, we're rooting for you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome to come back anytime when you feel like you have another project you want to share.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.
And
you persevered. People don't know you weren't feeling so well, but I think
I feel a little better than earlier.
Maybe it was me. Maybe it was our company. It was our conversation. I could
definitely.
Yeah, pull it out of you
definitely.
here. But yeah, you rallied.
God.
What time's the next one? You gotta keep going. Right?
In like 15 minutes.
Oh my god. Yeah, you need a break.
But guys, thank you so much for paying attention and following along. It's a 2-hour episode essentially, but we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you.
Mm.